So in this video, we're going to move out of the design workspace and we're going to try and create a fully photorealistic render of our hex mod. We've now modeled everything that we need to model. So what we're going to do is make a few adjustments, and then from those adjustments, we'll make something that looks really, really good. First thing we're going to do is we're going to move the arms so that they fit in the right place. Right now they're sort of straight out, and whilst that's not a problem, it doesn't look great. So we're going to have it standing up a little bit more. Now you might have remembered that we enabled contact sets in the subassembly, but we still need to do that in this assembly because there are no contacts enabled. So if we go into Assemble, say Enable all contact, then contact is onto all. And what we're going to do is we're going to move our legs down to the point that they meet. This just means that all of our legs will be at the same place. If you wanted them to be slightly higher in your render, what you could do is you could draw a box on the bottom or a plane with a very thin line, and then you'd find that each of your legs would be pulled down up to that point and use that as a contact set. But in this case, I'm just going to pull them down so that they meet the bottom. You can see it's sort of standing up a little bit more. We're also going to add the hex logo onto each of our little feet. Now for this, we can go into the subassembly and do it within the subassembly specifically. Now if you actually look, there's not much space. I want to put my logo on this area here. Not much space, so I might just edit my foot slightly just to reduce the size and give me a bit more space for my logo. So I'm just going to go in, edit my part, capture position, and we can just go in and edit this. I'm just going to remove that fillet by highlighting and pressing delete. And then you actually find you can edit these in a lot of different ways. I'm going to use the Move tool. I'm going to select Faces. I can select this face here to move it slightly. So I'm actually going to move it in towards the part. So it's a little bit thinner, a little bit shorter. Maybe not quite that far, about there. I was going to make it a little bit thinner because I think it's a little bit thick right now. So I could either use the Move tool or I'm actually going to use the Press Pull tool. Make it 1 mm less on either side. A little bit thinner. I'm going to re-add some fillets onto these edges. So let's go with 3 mm. That looks pretty good, and I've got some space now for my logo. You'll see that all of the others will have changed in accordance with that because they are all linked to the same component. I'm going to insert SVG. Now, an SVG file is a sketch file effectively, and it gives you the specific lines. I have my hex logo SVG already in my hexapod project, so in your data panel you can always upload other files. It doesn't have to be a Fusion file, it can be any type of file. So you can have PDFs in there, you can have really anything, and this means that you can use it with your group or with anybody that you're collaborating with to not only share CAD files but also anything else. I have my SVG here. If you wanted to insert it from your downloads, you can insert from your computer instead. Press Insert. You'll see this little Insert SVG box pop up, and we can choose the sketch plane that we want it to be inserted to. In this case, we want it on this front surface. And from the front surface, we've selected that plane. We can now use the Move tools to move it into position. You can just about see the outline. A little bit faint, but it is just lines, so watch out for that. You can use these tools. We have up, down, moving the plane, flipping, and also rotating and scale. Now ours is a little bit big right now. I'm just going to drag this down and scale it down a little bit. I just want it to fit in. And look at it. Use the Look At tool to look at this face. And then I can see how that's fitting into my space. I'm going to make it a tiny little bit smaller. And just get it into the middle there. Once I'm happy with how it looks, I can press OK. So now that I have this sketch effectively, I can press E on my keyboard, choose Extrude, and I'm going to choose this outline and 3 letters. Now I could bring it out or I could push it in. In my case, I think I'm going to cut it into the body by 1 mm. but you could choose to bring it out or do whatever you want with it really. I'm going to click OK, and then it's not very visible right now, so I'm actually going to go in, change my appearances, select faces, and then I'll use this in the glossy white and bring it in, and I can select all of these faces just to make it a little bit more clear what's going on. I think that looks really good. You'll notice that's happened on all of them, which is what we wanted, so that's perfect. That's how you insert an SVG. You can also insert a DXF in a very similar way. A lot of you might be using DXFs. Alright, so now that we have put in our SVG, we've actually completed the final modeling process. We have everything that we want. We don't need to model anything else. What that means is that we can go into some of the other workspaces and experiment with what we can do. You can go into other workspaces using the big button at the top left, and there are a bunch of different workspaces. We're going to go through most of them. The only one we're not going to look at is generative design. The next one down on the list is rendering, so we're going to go straight to that. You can open the Render Workspace from here. You'll see that the ribbon at the top changes completely, the timeline disappears, and you'll also see in your main view that it looks slightly different. Now the reason for this is that you now have shadows, you now have the lighting that has changed, and it's going into a slightly more sophisticated render model. First thing you can do is edit your appearances. Now we've gone through and we've edited our appearances quite well so far, I think. But we can just go through and add a few more. I want to make my ears and my main dome a little bit more interesting in colour. So maybe if we go into metal, you can find anodized blue. I think that looks quite cool. It's got some cool reflections. Now obviously this wouldn't be made of actual anodized aluminium, but it doesn't matter because we're trying to make this look great. We've got all this sort of black and grey in the middle, so potentially we could change that. The paint is quite a good option. I quite like the metal flake. I might bring in some yellow. Don't forget you can download new materials if they haven't been downloaded with the download button on the right hand side. I'm going to go in and I'm going to make my base plate, my ring, and metal flakes of gold, a yellow colour. I'm also going to make my linkages white or maybe the same yellow gold. But if you remember, because these are linked components, I can't do this from within the render view. So what I'm going to have to do is go back into design, open up edit in place for one of these, and then I can go in and modify the appearance from here. Let's make them the same yellow as the inside body. Now, if I save that, I'll save all of them. I can go back into the render workspace and it will have updated. Perfect. Finally, I'm going to make my ears slightly better colour. Download the metal flake back. I'm going to apply this to both. I want the inside to be a little bit more reflective, a bit like actual ears. I'm actually going to make those silver. But I don't want the whole body to be silver, I just want the inside face. So I'm going to select faces and drag it on. There we go, now black on the back and white on the front. Another thing to note about the appearances menu is that once it's up here at the top, you can actually edit some of these. So you could go in, right click on materials in this design section, click on edit, and you can adjust exactly how reflective or what colour they are to a huge degree. You can even go in, add advanced, and do a bunch of other things as well, a bit more technical. But now I'm just going to go in, I'm going to edit it, and I might just up the roughness a little bit more, just to give it a sort of slightly more grainy feel. I'm quite happy with that. My materials are looking quite good. We have our hex logo, we have these shiny metal flake are looking really great. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a decal. That's actually the third across. At the top you can go set up decal. You can also do this from the main design menu, from the insert section. If you add a decal, you'll see that any images that are in your project will appear here. I've already imported my iDecal into this project, but if you haven't, you can insert from the computer as well. Click and insert. It'll ask you for a face that you want to put it on. Now this doesn't have to be a flat face, it can be any face, so I'm actually going to put it on my dome. Now obviously this isn't quite what I want, but you can use the tools here to change exactly how you want it to look. I'm going to scale it down a little bit. And you can see that if I move it, it's actually, it bends according to the shape that we have on our part. So it's sticking to that surface. I'm going to look at it from the front, because that's where my eyes should be. I'm going to look at where they might look quite good. I think I might put them in the middle there. So I'm just going to add another decal, exactly the same, and just do exactly the same thing. You can spend a little bit more time on your decal if you want to, just getting it exactly how you want to, and it depends obviously on the dome shape that you've chosen. Now that I have my eyes looking quite funky, the ears are looking really great, we now have most of our design left. Next up is the scene settings. Now you can find this within the setup menu, scene settings, it's also at the top here. And what the scene settings does is it defines everything in your render other than your model. Currently our model is looking great, our appearances are looking really good, but everything else around it is just a bit grey, and whilst the lighting is good, we can make it so much better. First thing to change here, to do this, is to change it from a solid colour background to an environment. What this does is it defines a certain environment with certain lighting or backgrounds that you can change and make it a little bit more interesting. Once you've done this, you can go into the environment menu or the environment library, and you can select from a number of different environments. There's ones that are just different types of lighting, and there are ones that are different actual backgrounds, or HDRIs as they're known. In my case, I'm going to select the plaza, drag it, and drop it on. If you're finding that your model isn't quite sat on the floor of your image, you might want to flatten the ground. So this is really important. You'll see that if I uncheck that, I'm sort of hovering in the air. So flatten the ground and it will bring our part down onto the ground. You'll also see that our hex pod is tiny if you zoom out. So what we can do is we can adjust this using the position tool. This gives you rotation as well as ground scale. So not only can we rotate our part around so it's facing in a direction we like. I'm going to face mine towards that arch over there. I think that looks quite cool though, the sunlight. But you can also change your ground scale. You can zoom this in slightly. You'll see it jumps quite a lot as you get bigger. You can type in a number. I'm actually going to make this smaller so our part looks bigger. A bit more. Adjust that until you're happy with how it looks. I think that looks quite good. You can see these environments have a specific lighting. So in this case, our light is coming from the sun over there, and so our shadow is falling down across our part. You can change the intensity and brightness of the lighting with this up at the top. You can also have focal lengths, so you can change the camera focal lengths and have depth of field as well, and a number of other really cool things. We're not going to fiddle with those today, we're just going to end up with something looking really cool otherwise. Once you're happy, you can close. You can see we've got some really good reflections, so all it comes down to is finding a good position that you're happy with. Once you've done this, the next step is creating your render. Now there are two options for actually creating your part in a render. There is an in-canvas render, and then there's the teapot render. If you click on the in-canvas render, you'll notice that everything suddenly goes blurry. Now the reason for this is that your computer is computing every single pixel of the image and narrowing it down with iterations to get a really good quality finish. If you leave it for long enough, it'll continue to get higher and higher quality, and it just continues and continues until it's perfect. Ultimately though, you never really reach this point because it would take way too long. But if you do, you can save your image by capturing the image, and you can change your in-canvas render settings to make it from advanced fast. And if you're using in Canvas, I recommend that you change it to fast, because typically what you'll do is use in Canvas to determine how it's going to look, and then you do a normal teapot render to get the final image. So leaving it on fast just means you can have a good idea of what's going. If I just hide myself here very quickly, again, you can see that down in the bottom right hand side are these options. And this is what's going on in your in-canvas render. You have a blue bar going across, and the elapsed time and the iteration number. Now this defines how many iterations your render has gone through to get the part that you have at the moment, and the amount of time that's gone past. And you can define using the arrow here what quality you want to end up with. At excellent, it'll stop and it'll be very good quality. Final gives even better quality, or you can leave it on infinite and leave your computer for days, and it will just keep on shining it out until it continues getting better and better quality. The higher this goes, the better quality you'll get. But you can already see we're on iteration 117, and it's starting to look really good. You get some really good details on these parts. I turn myself back on. Hi. So the other option after that is the teapot render, and this is much better because it allows you to work whilst you're doing it. So if you notice here, we've had this render going for a little while, but as soon as I move it even slightly, it restarts. That's because it's rendering as it sees on the screen. But that means that if you change what it sees on the screen, it has to restart all over again. By using the teapot render, which is this little teapot at the top, it brings up a render box, and you can define what render you want to use. You can choose what type of image you want, for mobile, print, video, or custom. Typically, I go to print, and you can end up with a 3.2 megapixels, quite a good option, 5x7, 300 ppi. But this just depends on the quality. You can go really high quality or lower quality depending on the speed. The higher the quality, it'll take slightly longer to render. Now, all of this rendering is done on the cloud if you'd like to, or on your computer locally. But the great thing about Fusion is that because everything is based on the cloud, you can do a render on your cloud and it won't put any strain on your computer. It'll send it off and do it for you. So if you're on a laptop or a Chromebook, for example, you can do this and not have any issues at all. You can use a local render if you choose to, but this is up to your preference. Render quality, you have standard or final, and all this is changing the number of credits that you need. So cloud credits are Autodesk's use of their servers, so the more that you need to use the servers, the more credits will be. If you're on an education license, you'll be lucky enough that you have unlimited cloud credits, otherwise you have to go through and get them. I'm okay for this, luckily, so you can press render. I've gone for a really high quality render. Fusion will automatically save your file whenever you complete a render or a simulation at that point. And you can see down here in the render gallery that this image has appeared. It says it's been submitted a few seconds ago as the image size and the render quality. Once Fusion has completed this render, it'll pop up as an image, and you can click on it and see it. In the meantime though, whilst that's going, we can now move and complete another render and do something completely different. I'm going to do another one slightly closer up. Make this one a little bit shorter. And you can just keep doing these renders until you're happy with all, and they all appear as separate renders down here. You can also see the version that the file is in, and therefore see exactly which one of your renders is the right one. So for example, if you go and you complete your render, and then you actually realize that you want to change something, you can go back to the design workspace, come back, re-render it, and it'll show up as a different version because you've saved it. And that's one of the advantages of Fusion saving your file every time you render, so you can see exactly what's going on. I'm going to wait a few minutes for these renders to be completed, and then I'll come back to you. Alright, so welcome back. I've had these renders done now, they've completed their rendering. I actually did another one in the meantime, V11. You can see that if you click on these renders, once they're done, it opens up this box which shows you the final image in good quality. You have a couple of options of things you can do. Specifically, you could re-render it, or you could render it as a turntable, where it would take multiple snapshots around it. You can adjust some of your settings, such as the lighting, the exposure, saturation, etc. if you really wanted to get in and do some editing in that way. You can download your file. This is the most important one really. You can download it as several different image types, and if you're not using an environment, for example, you can download it with a transparent background, and it'll have just your model with completely nothing behind it, such as a PNG. If you enable this, you can only have a TIFF or a PNG. You can also delete your render from the rendering gallery, so it's not cluttering up your rendering gallery. And over on the right, you have share, some information on your render, and you can also zoom in. And you see if I zoom in, this is a really good quality image that we've got here. You can really see the detail. You can also scroll between your renders, so I have 3 of them. I have this one here, and that one there. I think this is probably my favourite. They all look really, really good, so hopefully you've managed to get a real-life render that you can use and you're proud of. If not, you can always go back, tweak things, and just keep working on it. It's much like a lot of other things in CAD, it's just an iterative process, trying to get the best that you can out of it. That sums up the Render Workspace. Everything else is in other workspaces, so next we're going to go in and talk about animation.